Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and we're really excited to say we have over 100 participants who are registered, and as I look at the participant count, it is only going up from there. So thank you so much for joining us. Let me explain how we will proceed. We'll begin with welcome comments from Ambassador Grotenhuis, the Netherlands Ambassador for Women's Rights and Gender Equality. The ambassador will be followed by two panelists, Felista Abdallah from the Kenya Sex Workers Alliance
and Karina Bravo from Ecuador representing Plopperts. And I will apologize for my poor Spanish accent, the Plataforma Latinoamericana de Personas que Ejercen el Trabajo Sexual, or the Latin American Platform of People Who Do Sex Work. Each of the panelists will speak for about 10 minutes. In between the speakers, we're really excited that we'll be showing short video clips by sex workers from 4 countries. These videos were produced in collaboration with the Global Network of Sex Work Projects, or NSWP, who is also co-hosting this event. We will have a 10-minute question and answer period at the end. We are asking people to please feel free to put your questions and comments in the chat at any point. We have a fantastic team who will be monitoring them to answer the questions they can immediately in the chat, and they will also be monitoring questions to pose to the panelists at the end in the Q&A period. And I am really excited that this webinar launches the Count Me In Consortium's 2-week-long Counting Sex Workers In campaign. The Count Me In Consortium supports the voices and activism of women, girls, non-binary, gender non-conforming, trans, and intersex people who are the most marginalized in their communities. And it's clear to us that among the most silenced voices are those of sex workers. In response, this campaign puts a spotlight on sex worker advocacy and highlights the voices and perspectives of sex workers of all genders. It also advances an understanding that sex worker rights are human rights and a feminist issue. Campaign runs from today, October 26th through November 10th, and you can find more about it at www.cmiconsortium.org. And also there you can see the full list of the CMI consortium members. They are Mama Cash, the Red Umbrella Fund, AWID, PRIA, Jazz, Just Associates, and the Urgent Action Fund Africa, representing its sister funds in the US and Latin America. And finally, we're joined by the Dutch gender platform Women Equals Men as a strategic partner. So with that introduction, we would like to especially thank our co-host, the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Global Network of Sex Work Projects. We are grateful to both for a long and ongoing collaboration. In fact, the webinar was initially scheduled as a panel at the 2020 Commission on the Status of Women, which was to be held in March, but as many of you know, it was postponed because of COVID. And the panel that was to be held, that is now this webinar, followed up on our joint panel at CSW 63 on sex work and social protection, and we will have a link to the video from that panel on our webpage. And we're really glad that we can make this happen now virtually. And again, thanks everyone for joining. Ambassador Grotenhuis, I'd like to invite you to welcome us to the webinar and to give us your thoughts about the Netherlands' commitment to supporting sex worker rights and especially sex worker-led organizing and advocacy, reflecting on what this has meant in the time of COVID-19. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Susanna, and a warm welcome to everybody joining. Thanks for the opportunity to participate in today's panel. I immediately said yes to it, of course, because in my previous job as the Netherlands ambassador in Mozambique, we financed the program Hands Off, a program implemented by the Dutch AIDS Fund and partners to reduce violence against sex workers. So we work directly with sex worker-led groups, police and NGOs working on human rights and adequate health services. And for me, the main takeaway, also after spending a day and an evening with the sex workers in Maputo, is to really listen and then to amplify their voices into the discussions with government and other partners about policies that actually affect them. So I'm very pleased to be here today with quite a few other Dutch partners to underline the Netherlands' commitment to supporting sex workers' rights, always, and especially now in these challenging COVID times. Last year at the CSW 63, the Count Me In Consortium, the Oriental Republic of Uruguay, and the Kingdom of the Netherlands jointly organized the first side event with sex workers within the UN buildings. This event focused on sex workers' rights to social protection and discussed the expansion of social protection systems to adequately protect workers in all forms of employment. We also stressed the importance to recognize that sex workers work and underlined the focus on women's agency and their capacity to challenge their exploitation and exercise their rights. The COVID-19 pandemic, as with other health crises, exposes existing inequalities and disproportionately affects people that are already criminalized, marginalized, and living in financially difficult situations, amongst whom sex workers. Widespread lockdown measures impacted women in the informal sector the hardest, as social protection entitlements are tied closely to formal employment. For sex workers, it's either perpetuated women's economic insecurity or forced women to continue working and risk exposure to COVID-19 and the increased violence we're seeing. The COVID-19 pandemic underlined the importance of adequate and inclusive social protection systems. All economic responses, including social protection and stimulus packages, must therefore be comprehensive and gender responsive, and particularly meet the needs of workers with informal and non-standard forms of employment, like sex workers. The loss of income and livelihoods, increased security and inequality sex workers face as a result of the COVID-19 measures are mounted onto the challenges sex workers already faced prior to the outbreak of this pandemic. In countries where sex work is criminalized, and those are still the vast majority, unfortunately, the environment for sex workers is even more harmful. In these countries, the rights of sex workers to their bodily autonomy and to their rights as workers are denied. In the Netherlands, we've seen a few successes at the local level due to the hard work of the sex workers communities in the COVID pandemic. Certain municipalities, like the city of The Hague, have adopted measures to financially support sex workers who have lost their income due to the crisis. At the national level, however, there's still quite a lot of work to be done to ensure full social protection for all. Looking at the international level, our international policy strongly focuses on the political role of civil society organizations and supports their critical voice in order to influence the public discourse and change in policies, laws, and social norms. In particular, we aim for women to influence decision-making processes and take leadership positions in public, private, and civic spheres. That's why I'm very pleased that we have quite a few of the Dutch organizations we work with together as well. We want their voices to be heard, and especially of those finding themselves in marginalized positions, amongst whom sex workers. We want to count them in. We want to be inclusive. That's why we strongly support self-led organizations with an emphasis on access and availability to quality services and focus on preventing and eliminating violence against all women and girls. While we face many challenges as we move forward, the sex workers community is marked by powerful and collective organizing and advocacy to support and protect sex workers. A good example is the initiative by Mama Cash, who's also participating today, who launched the Recovery and Resilience Fund that addresses immediate and long-term needs for communities who are faced with loss of livelihoods and access to medical care due to the lockdowns. The importance of meaningful participation of women, including sex workers, in decision-making processes whose lives are affected by COVID-19 measures is paramount. In times of crisis, the international community has demonstrated its ability to rapidly mobilize and disperse funds to those affected. But during this pandemic, it became apparent that our current systems are not yet equipped with the infrastructure to support community-based women's rights organizations with long-term commitment and strong ties to the communities they serve with the required emergency relief funds. So it's evident that we need to reflect on our current systems and explore possibilities to rethink and collaborate more closely with women funds and women's rights organizations. The Netherlands will continue to advocate for this in different forums and in conversations with international organizations and other partners. I feel truly honored to participate today in this event and look forward to learn from the contributions by the other panelists. I'm counting on you to share your experiences, to share your ideas, so that we can further amplify your voices. Count me in as your ally. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ambassador, and thank you for the tremendous support that you have given to sex workers' rights and to sex worker-led organizing and advocacy over the years. And with that, we will show a video. The video is of Marina Avramenko from the Russian Sex Workers Forum.
Во время пандемии COVID-19 в России весной 2020 года был объявлен режим так называемой самоизоляции. В это время людям нельзя было выходить далеко от дома, только в магазин за продуктами, за лекарствами и выгуливать домашних животных. За нарушение этих правил было очень суровое наказание, был штраф до $600. Сотрудники полиции предпочитали наказывать именно за нарушение режима самоизоляции, а не за секс-работу, потому что там штрафы гораздо более высокие. Секс-работники потеряли свой доход, потому что их клиенты перестали пользоваться секс-услугами. Они не имели для этого зарплату, потому что находились в вынужденных отпусках и не имели возможности приехать к секс-работникам. В этой ситуации форум секс-работников распространял информацию по правовому обучению, то есть мы объясняли, за что, какие штрафы положены, как можно избежать или обжаловать эти штрафы. Мы распространяли информацию о том, как можно изготовить средства индивидуальной защиты, например, маски на лицо, или чем можно обрабатывать руки, чтобы избежать риска заражения. Мы советовали, как лучше работать, как безопаснее работать, оказывать секс-услуги для того, чтобы минимизировать риск заражения ковид. Кроме этого, форум секс-работников сделал специальную памятку о том, какие пособия могут получить секс-работники наравне с другими гражданами. Специальных пособий или какой-то помощи для секс-работников, конечно, государство не предусмотрело. Но мы объяснили, что секс-работники могут встать на учет по безработице, чтобы иметь официальный статус и небольшой какой-то доход. Это сложно, но в период пандемии это было упрощено, порядок обращения. И как можно еще получить пособия на детей, которые давало государство. Секс-работники, очень многие благодарили нас за эту информацию и воспользовались этими пособиями. Вообще пандемия очень сильно повлияла на рынок секс-услуг в плохую сторону.
And I don't know if Marina is listening in today, probably not given time differences, but thank you, Marina. So I just wanted to say one other thing about the video and the panel. COVID, as everybody knows, COVID's been really difficult for everyone, and it's been devastating for a lot of sex worker and sex worker rights initiatives. In the panel, we made a decision that while, of course, we want to talk about how the pandemic has affect sex workers and sex workers' rights initiatives, we also really wanted to focus on what sex workers are doing. So not just how they've been affected, but how sex workers have been mobilizing within their own communities, given, as the ambassador said, in most cases, sex workers haven't been part of government's relief efforts. So our focus really is on the amazing work that sex workers have done in their communities to fill in those gaps. And with that, I'd like to hand this over to Felicita Abdallah. As I said, Felicita is with the Kenya Sex Workers Alliance. Felicita, over to you.
Thank you very much, Susanna. So today, like African woman, just to send a message to all the women and all the feminists so that they can have a clear understanding that so women. And today I'm here to share my experiences as one of the women who is sitting in the advisory group of gender equality for Beijing Plus 25. I think one of my nominations was very challenging. The reason why, because women stood up to come and challenge why I was nominated to sit in the advisory committee, simply because I am a sex worker, and even other women who were supporting sex workers' agenda were actually challenged, and there was a protest of me as a person not to be sitting on that position or to be removed for me to be sitting part in that position. This simply shows that how sex workers are being removed on the tables simply because of the opportunities or the jobs they have chosen. One of the things that we need to put it clear to all the women outside there is the fact that gender equality is for all the women. Sex work has been part and parcel of the women's movement. It was a real struggle, but I want to thank all the women's movement who supported me and supported all the sex workers so that they can be able to occupy the table. This has shown inequality in many spaces where sex workers are sitting, and we have been denied opportunities and spaces simply because of who we are and maybe sometimes where we come from. We have actually seen that even during this COVID time, how sex workers have been denied opportunities and spaces for them to be able to sit on the table where people are actually responding to COVID itself. So this has become very complicated. This is an issue that is really affecting sex workers simply because people have their own understanding and their own misbeliefs about sex workers. It has actually made many of the sex workers lost their lives simply because they cannot be able to occupy tables or spaces. It has actually made some of the sex workers become homeless because it is quite difficult for us as sex workers to operate within this COVID pandemic. I want to give an example of my country, Kenya. Now that in Kenya, there was curfew, and it was actually stopping sex workers from operating because it was starting from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So it was actually complicated for sex workers to be able to operate or to work. This became very complicated and very difficult. Sex workers, many of them lost their homes. Many of them, their children were able to access the online schooling that the government had appointed as one of the things that was supposed to be done. Many of the sex workers who are living with HIV, it was difficult for them to access their ARVs because the transport went very high, public transport, and they were unable to go. Many of the sex workers had to move from where they live, and we used to live 20 sex workers in one house, which became very complicated and even unaffordable, even for a huge number of sex workers to stay in the same house. COVID is a pandemic for everyone. When women are talking about responding to COVID, it is important for sex workers to be on the table so that they can be able to see how this response is fitting to our community. It's important for sex workers to occupy each and every space so that they can be able to look at how their community are getting the support and the assistance that they need to get. We want to thank all the partners who have come out to support us and to stand with us during this difficult time. But to be sincere, our experiences have not been easy. And this is the reason why, because it was not started earlier. It started even during CSW. We saw sex workers we saw sex workers were missing on the table. And many at the times when we were at the panel, women were actually coming out to speak huge bad words to us, which were making us to feel very small, which were making us like as if we were not important. And that is not what gender equality is not about. Today, now that we are here to speak about Beijing Plus 25, I think it's a space for all the women. Sex workers missed in the platform 25 years ago. I think this is an opportunity for us as a community to be part and parcel, sit on the table and make sure that we understand the agenda just like any other women. We might not be technical, as people are saying, but we have lived life experiences where we are going to bring them on the table and we are going to make them technical so that you can be able to understand where we are coming from. We understand people have knowledge, but our lived experiences are more important than any other thing that anybody is bringing on the table. So this time I'm taking an opportunity to say, I think sex workers are trying, sex workers are smart, and sex workers do it better. Only if they are given an opportunity and they are given a table and our knowledges are there to put on the table, because we are the people on the ground. We are the people doing this work. We know where to do better. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Felicita. And with that, we will go to the next video of Jules Kim from the Scarlet Alliance in Australia.
Hi, my name's Jules Kim. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Scarlet Alliance, Australian Sex Workers Association. Probably the most significant challenge for sex workers in Australia during the COVID pandemic was the fact that we had to stop working and that we had no income. In Australia, many sex workers were able to access government economic support. What it did mean was that there were a number of sex workers that still fell through the gaps, and it highlighted the importance of having a nationally consistent, fully decriminalised model of sex work. What it did mean was that sex workers that were ineligible for government financial support were supported by other sex workers through an emergency fundraiser. Scarlet Alliance and our member organisations mobilised to create a 100% sex worker-led fund available in 5 of the key languages in the current sex worker community in Australia, and 100% of the donations being distributed to sex workers each week. Unfortunately, the need has always exceeded the donations, and it would be much better if we did have a fully decriminalised framework and sex workers were able to access government economic support just like other workers. But it was important that sex workers, as usual, stepped up to fill the gaps left behind by poor policy.
Thank you, Jules. I imagine, again, given time differences, Jules is probably not watching this at the moment, but thanks to you anyway. So we're going to hear now from Karina Bravo from Flappers.
Perdón. Buenos días a todos y todas. Agradecer a CREA, a NSWP y a todas las personas que han hecho posible que estemos aquí en este evento, ¿no? Quiero comenzar indicando, si bien es cierto, a las trabajadoras sexuales, cuando comenzó la pandemia nos quedamos así como en shock porque no sabíamos realmente cómo movernos. Pero eso también permitió de que no nos quedemos ahí paralizados, viendo que nuestras poblaciones estaban siendo afectadas, que se estaban quedando sin trabajo, sino comenzamos a reunirnos, comenzamos a conversar cómo movernos para poder ayudar a nuestras bases, ¿no? Y comenzamos a hacerlo así, comenzamos a buscar algunas estrategias como por ejemplo autogestión, hacer campañas solicitando recursos, campaña de recolección de alimentos, hacer incidencia hacia el Estado, ¿no? Que casi o poco ha dado respuesta a nuestras poblaciones. E incidir también que en los programas sociales se incluya el tema de las trabajadoras sexuales, como Argentina, Ecuador, Perú, hacer mucha incidencia, que miren a este sector, porque si bien es cierto, el Estado es el que decide quién tiene derecho a comer, quién tiene derecho a vivir, cuando las trabajadoras sexuales somos unas ciudadanas importantes en todo el tema de la prevención, en todo el tema de la promoción de la salud. Comenzamos a mirar también que no solamente era cubrir el tema de alimentos a nuestras poblaciones, sino también el tema de la promoción y la prevención del COVID, enseñarles a cómo prevenir el COVID en su entorno, donde ellas, muchísimas se quedaron trabajando, muchísimas se quedaron afuera en la calle y nosotros íbamos a buscar a nuestras compañeras en los diferentes países para poder saber cómo estaban, para poder cubrir sus necesidades básicas, que no solamente era alimentos, sino un pago de arriendo, mantener a sus niños. Y en sí, en esa medida fuimos buscando algunas otras organizaciones internacionales que comenzaron a ayudarnos a mirar, ¿no es cierto?, toda esta gestión y toda esta campaña que comenzamos a hacer de forma comunicacional para poder pedir apoyo y poder llevar alimento a nuestras compañeras, y no solamente de ciertos sectores, sino en ese momento nos olvidamos de las diferencias que había entre las trabajadoras sexuales, sino comenzamos a ampliar el marco para podernos ayudar absolutamente todo. Y la cosa que también hicimos es que el Estado mire a las personas que viven con VIH-Sida, porque si bien es cierto, comenzaron a salir algunos acuerdos, algunas normativas de cómo tenía que ser dado el medicamento a las personas que viven con VIH-Sida, pero en la mayoría de los países esto no se estaba cumpliendo. Entonces nos tocaba a las líderes trabajadoras sexuales buscar a nuestras compañeras positivas para incentivarlas de que tomen la medicina, de que vayan a retirar su medicina. Y no solamente eso, al mismo tiempo que nosotros le pedíamos que no deje su medicina, su tratamiento a un lado, teníamos que cubrir su necesidad básica, como es la alimentación y algunas otras cosas fundamentales que ella necesitaba en ese momento, ¿no? Actualmente continuamos nosotros apoyándonos, continuamos buscando recursos para el tema de alimentación, pero esto va más allá, no solamente es las cosas necesarias y básicas, sino lo que queremos las trabajadoras sexuales es fortalecer la participación, fortalecer el empoderamiento. Si bien es cierto, en aquel momento que comenzó la pandemia, nosotros comenzábamos a ejecutar la herramienta del SWI, que nos ha servido muchísimo para hacer incidencia en empoderamiento, en participación, en abordar también la violencia que se ha dado justo en este momento de la pandemia, donde mayormente aflora el estigma de discriminación, la putafobia, ¿no es cierto? Y el dejar a un lado a esta población y nosotros hacer algunas estrategias para que el Estado nos mire, para que sepa que somos ciudadanas y no somos ciudadanas de segunda clase, sino somos ciudadanas con derecho. Lo que creemos que es importante y fundamental es fortalecer la participación de las líderes trabajadoras sexuales, la participación y exponer nuestras voces y nuestras necesidades de acuerdo a nuestro contexto. Es importante continuar trabajando en esto, continuar en el empoderamiento de nuestras poblaciones, fortalecer a las organizaciones, que no se nos deje a un lado, porque nosotros también tenemos derechos, somos ciudadanas y lo que hacemos es trabajo, aunque muchas personas no lo entiendan, aunque el tema abolicionismo justo en este momento es donde mayormente ha aflorado, criminalizando el trabajo sexual, haciendo ver que todas las formas de cómo poder trabajar para poder llevar un recurso a los diferentes mecanismos que estamos utilizando las trabajadoras sexuales, porque actualmente a nivel regional todos los locales están cerrados, pero las mujeres estamos buscando diferentes alternativas, cómo poder sobrevivir en esta pandemia. Frente a eso, nos hemos unido o alquilamos departamentos y enseguida la policía sale como que son bandas o redes de tratantes, cuando no es así. Le estamos haciendo entender a la policía que son alternativas que las trabajadoras sexuales estamos haciendo para poder sobrevivir justo en este momento de la pandemia. Creo que la peor pandemia no ha sido el mismo COVID, sino ha sido todo este tema de la discriminación, la desigualdad, la inequidad que existe, ¿no? El no mirar a las poblaciones clave como un ente fundamental e importante de poder prevenir el COVID, así como lo hicimos una vez con el VIH-Sida. Nosotros somos fundamental e importante de seguir trabajando en la prevención, de poder ayudar a que los casos de COVID no sigan aumentando. Especialmente hay países que mayormente ha afectado el COVID, que hemos tenido muchas bajas de nuestras compañeras trabajadoras sexuales, como es el tema de Perú, donde mayormente ha habido compañeras que hemos tenido afectadas del COVID, más no así en otros países, puesto que hemos estado ahí constantemente llevando la prevención a nuestras compañeras. Es importante que nos miren, es importante participar, es importante seguir buscando recursos para seguir trabajando en el empoderamiento de nuestras poblaciones, fortalecer nuestras capacidades, ¿no es cierto? Es fundamental e importante que no olviden que nos reconozcan como ciudadanas y que contar con políticas y leyes que realmente protejan y garanticen los derechos de las personas que ejercemos trabajo sexual. Y frente a eso, nosotros seguimos haciendo incidencias, seguimos haciendo estrategias, siempre estamos mirando y cada cosa que nosotros buscamos o adquirimos, no solamente lo hacemos para un sector, sino estamos ampliando las redes de trabajadoras sexuales a nivel nacional. Cada líder de trabajadora sexual de PLAPER está buscando a otras líderes que muchas veces no son consideradas porque no están en las ciudades grandes, están en las ciudades pequeñas, y hacia ellas también nosotros estamos yendo para poder apoyar, para poder compartir todas las cosas que hemos aprendido, justo las estrategias en este momento del COVID. No sé si ya tengo los 10 minutos, me pasé. Bueno, es fundamental para nosotros que se nos escuche. Es lo que más pedimos, y aprovechar que están aquí algunas organizaciones que incidan en la política. Es importante seguir trabajando en la prevención, porque justo en este momento de esta pandemia, donde mayormente por la necesidad de querer trabajar, muchísimas de nuestras compañeras pueden dejar a un lado el tema de usar la prevención, y donde mayormente estamos incidiendo el no dejarlo, el de continuar con la prevención. Hemos incidido muchísimo en salud, en obligar que el Estado vuelva a atender a nuestras poblaciones, porque realmente todo estaba enfocado en el COVID, y dejar a un lado a las poblaciones clave que necesariamente por el derecho de cuidar nuestra salud queríamos ir a los servicios de salud. Entonces hemos hecho incidencia muchísimo en eso, en volver a los espacios de salud donde se dé una atención de calidad y calidez. No hay insumos, hemos incidido, estamos teniendo reuniones con el MSP, con la estrategia del VIH-Sida, con algunas organizaciones que tienen que ver con la salud, que tienen que ver con los derechos. Estamos denunciando los casos de violación de derechos de las mujeres trabajadoras sexuales. Estamos denunciando toda la violación de los derechos. Estamos enseñando también a nuestra base a no quedarse callada, a denunciar y aprovechar este momento de pandemia, a sacar el provecho de las cosas buenas que podemos hacer justo en este momento, de escribir en los chats, de escribir en el Facebook de lo que está pasando en nuestra población, y no quedarnos solamente en la queja, sino también proponer cuáles son las cosas que queremos nuestra población, cuál es el camino a seguir, y que nos miren como ciudadanas, ¿sí? Y que no vamos a parar, así nos quieren criminalizar, así nos persiguen a las defensoras de derechos, nosotros no vamos a parar, nosotros vamos a seguir hablando, vamos a seguir diciendo cuáles son nuestras necesidades, qué es lo que mayormente queremos las personas que ejercemos trabajo sexual, que son derechos, que son que el Estado cubra nuestras necesidades, que seamos incluidas en los programas, ¿sí? Y que también busquemos otras alternativas. Por ejemplo, hemos hecho algunas propuestas de buscar otras alternativas de algunas compañeras que tienen miedo de ir a trabajar, porque también están comenzando a criminalizar lo que estamos haciendo, y estamos buscando alternativas, por ejemplo, transferencias económicas, crear emprendimientos económicos de acuerdo a lo que crea la compañera que tiene la capacidad de poder hacer, crear un microemprendimiento, de pronto un pequeño restaurante, de pronto cosas alternativas, hasta ir logrando que nuevamente los espacios de trabajo sexual se vuelvan a abrir, porque a nivel regional están cerrados, excepto de Nicaragua, que nunca cerraron los locales, y que nuestras compañeras estuvieron expuestas todo el tiempo al tema del COVID, y nuestras líderes también expuestas al COVID. Continuar trabajando en el tema de prevención y promoción, no solamente del VIH-Sida, sino también en el tema de nuestros derechos. No sé si ya tengo los 10 minutos porque no estoy controlando.
Thank you so much, Karina. I wanted to make a couple of comments just to direct folks. So Karina talked about the SWIT, and the SWIT is a tool to support sex worker engagement in HIV responses. If you look in the chat, you will find the link to the SWIT. And I really encourage everyone to take a look at it and think about using it. Karina spoke to how useful it's been for her and for the work that Plappers is doing. I've certainly heard that many times over the years. So you can find the SWIT and the NSWP guide to the SWIT in the chat. I also wanted to follow up on one of the points that Felicita was making. Felicita talked about the Gender Equality Forum and the Gender Equality Forum process that is commemorating the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. I know that there's some comments in the chat about that, but I did want to just add that one of the mechanisms that's part of the Gender Equality Forum are what are called action coalitions. There are 6 action coalitions, and the idea, there are one on gender-based violence, one on economic justice and rights, one on bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights, one on feminist action for climate justice, The fifth is on technology and innovation for gender equality. And the sixth is on feminist movements and leadership. The leadership of these Action Coalition is drawn from all sectors, and sometime, hopefully very soon, information about joining in that process will be disseminated widely. So look for that, and you can find more information on the forum.generationequality.org website. So just a little interlude. And with that, we will go to the next video.
My name is Shauna Mae Trotman. I am a member of Guyana Sex Work Coalition. I sit on the board of Caribbean Sex Work Coalition. Nobody cares about HIV anymore. Nobody cares about sex workers anymore. Everybody is about the pandemic. Yeah, we know that the pandemic is very important, but sex workers are still facing difficult times in the field. Right? And there's nothing that is being done for sex workers. It's very, very difficult out there. It's already been difficult for sex workers and their families. And it's more difficult now because nobody's paying attention to anything else other than the pandemic, other than Corona. In some Caribbean countries, curfews are at 9. Some Caribbean countries, like right here in Guyana, it's 6 o'clock. And after 6, police on the road, they chase you off the streets, you cannot work. Now sex worker kids are at home, and it's very difficult for them to find money to sustain these children, to pay their bills, and to stay healthy, and so on. Sex workers are forgotten.
Thank you, Shauna Mae. So just to note, we will get to the Q&A in just a little bit, but because we've talked a lot about the challenges, we wanted to take one moment to share with you a little bit about the NSWP COVID webpage. So you've heard today, of course, and many of you already know, I know there are quite a few sex worker activists who are joining us from what I can see in the chat and looking at the list of participants. As you know, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, sex workers around the world are experiencing hardship, a total loss of income, and increased discrimination and harassment. The Global Network of Sex Work Project has been reporting on the impact of COVID-19 on sex workers on its COVID-19 page that you see here on the screen. This amazing resource provides links to resources and the latest news on how the pandemic is affecting sex workers around the world, including access to the Global Network's NSWP's 5 reports looking at the impact of COVID-19 on sex workers and sex work organizations in the 5 NSWP regions based on responses to the COVID-19 impact survey. This survey was launched in April in order to document the impact of the pandemic on sex workers and sex work organizations around the world. Responses show what we've heard and what we've said, that sex workers have experienced a total loss of income, raids on homes and workplaces, as Karina was talking about, interruption of services, including access to HIV treatment, condom supplies, etc., and a lack of social protection, underscoring the points that our panelists and videos have discussed today. I'll just give you one more minute to take a look at it, and we will, thank you. And Ruth from the NSWP has put the link to the website in the chat. Thank you, Ruth. And I really do encourage everyone to take a look, use this resource, use all the resources that are available to you. So we are going to see one more video from Diana Rivas And then we will turn to the Q&A. So think about your questions, put them in the chat. We will do our best to answer as many as we can. So Diana Rivas, video, please.
Bueno, el desafío que nosotras como trabajadoras sexuales hemos tenido en esta pandemia, en el COVID-19, han sido muchas. Una de ellas es que nos cerraron los locales totalmente, absolutamente todos los locales. Esto nos ha obligado a nosotras a salir a las calles, a realizar nuestro trabajo, a trabajar clandestinamente, a trabajar por medio de llamadas. De parte del Estado, bueno, no hemos recibido la atención que nosotros hemos querido recibir, porque el Estado se ha enfocado más en lo que es la pandemia, en lo que es el COVID, y ha dejado a un lado todo lo que es la población, y entre esa población estamos nosotros, que somos las trabajadoras sexuales. Bueno, esto ha hecho que nosotros como representantes de organizaciones nos unamos, hemos recibido ayuda de organizaciones internacionales, y esto ha hecho que nosotros ayudemos a nuestras compañeras por medio de estas organizaciones y por nosotras mismas, que hemos arrimado el hombro para podernos ayudar con kit de alimentos, con transferencias, con kit de aseo personal y entre otras cosas más. Queremos también que el Estado nos garantice protección social y seguridad, y que las leyes no criminalicen el trabajo sexual, que nos dejen de seguir porque nosotros no somos tratantes de personas, porque no queremos que nos metan en el mismo saco de estas personas. Nosotros somos sujetas de derechos, nosotros somos mujeres con derechos, y queremos que esto se termine para seguir trabajando nosotros en nuestros derechos como lo estamos haciendo, como lo seguiremos haciendo, pero queremos que el Estado nos garantice todo esto. Quiero que se entienda que trabajo sexual es trabajo.
Thank you, Diana. I should have said that Diana is also from Clapperts, the same organization that Karina is with. So we now have a moment for Q&A, and keep them coming in the chat. We have a couple of questions lined up already. So if my panelists are ready, I will go straight to the questions. And the first one, and bear with me, it's a very full question. So the first question is, and this is to you, Ambassador. Even though the Dutch model on sex work is improvable, it has demonstrated how effective it can be towards sex worker rights during the pandemic. And the contrary is happening in France, where violence has risen since client criminalization was approved. The question is the Netherlands willing to push forward in the UN and the EU toward repealing the advance of the Nordic model? Ambassador.
Hi, thank you very much for this important question. We are definitely willing to speak and to engage in the dialogue. That's why I think it's really important to hear firsthand from many of the speakers today the challenges they face, so that we can take that up into the EU and the UN, as we did last year with the meeting and today again. So yes, we will definitely take it up.
Thank you, Ambassador. So the next question, and this is for everyone, but particularly for Felicita and Karina, though, Ambassador, it would be great to get your thoughts on this as well. What can feminists learn from sex workers in terms of movement building and organizing during COVID-19? And I think it's a recognition of the necessity of organizing, but also the incredible diversity and successful organizing that sex workers have done. So let me first turn to you, Felicita, and then we'll go to Karina, and then Ambassador, I'll ask if you have any additional comments.
Yes, thank you. So I think the only way to make it successful or people to learn or feminists to learn from the sex workers movement when it comes to COVID response, it's the fact that it's very important if the sex workers are not missing in any of the stages, because community empowerment, it's about planning, it's about monitoring, and it's about evaluation, and it is also about implementation. So it means even from the planning level, when people are making committees, when people are making tables where women are given an opportunity for them to be able to respond to COVID, I think it is also important for sex workers to be on the table. And the only way to involve the sex workers or to learn from the sex workers movement, it's by making sure that the sex workers are occupying many spaces so that they can be able to sensitize and tell more people about how their movement is growing, how the COVID response is done by us, what we think will work for us as a community when it comes to COVID response.
Thank you, Felicita. Over to you, Karina, just again with the reminder for those of you who are listening in Spanish, please turn your interpretation off. And for those who are listening in other languages, please make sure your interpretation is on. Karina.
Bueno, creo que la primera cosa que deberían de las feministas hacer es mirarnos que somos iguales, no somos diferentes. Mirarnos como mujeres, primero que nada, y que tenemos puntos en común, ¿sí? Y que esos puntos en común es la violencia. Y que es por eso que debemos unirnos, ¿no? Que es por eso de que seamos portavoz de llevar eso en todos los espacios que estemos como mujeres. Reconocernos como mujeres, si somos feministas, si somos trabajadoras sexuales, y que estamos ahí para unirnos, ¿no? Para trabajar y posesionar cosas en común, que lo único diferente que hacemos es el trabajo, que para nosotros es trabajo y algunas veces no lo ven así, pero para nosotros es trabajo. Yo me he encontrado con algunas feministas ahora poco que no se han querido sentar en la misma mesa con trabajadoras sexuales porque piensan que nosotros estamos promocionando el tema de la trata de personas cuando no es así. Hemos sido las trabajadoras sexuales las pioneras en decir que no estamos de acuerdo con la trata, y yo creo que eso es fundamental, que las feministas también sean portavoces de lo que decimos las trabajadoras sexuales, es que nos incluyan en todos los espacios que participan ellas, que estemos en debates donde estemos igual, que podamos hablar de igual como mujeres, como seres humanos.
Thank you, Karina. Ambassador, would you like to add anything to that? Otherwise, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think many important things have been said. It's important to find a common ground. So link with the feminist organizations, find a topic that is high on the priority list for the movement, but also very important for the sex workers, and then liaise. And also liaise with the decision-making people. So who is your partner at the municipality, at the national level, at a different level? And I always find if you join up together, you actually make more impact and you are heard or listened to earlier. So join up with the feminist movement, see what's combining you, maybe the increased violence or maybe human rights or other things that are both high on the priority list, and then join up would be my advice.
Thank you, Ambassador. So the next question, again to Felicita and Karina, have sex workers who worked in person only in your context, have they moved to working online because of COVID, and what are the challenges they faced in doing that? Karina, let's start with you and then we'll come back to you, Felicita. Please,
bueno, los retos de trabajar de esa forma en línea son muchos, ¿no es cierto? Porque muchos de los clientes te contactan en línea y muchas veces no sabemos qué tipo de cliente es. Y frente a eso también en línea hemos tenido mucho acoso, mucha persecución hacia las trabajadoras del sexo, ¿no es cierto? Gente que utiliza esto para podernos estigmatizar y criminalizar también, ¿no es cierto? Y muchas veces la policía también utiliza esta forma para poder saber a dónde estamos y desde dónde estamos haciendo este tipo de de trabajo, ¿no? Entonces es mucho más peligroso para nosotros, pero nos manejamos con mucho cuidado porque también la necesidad es grande y nuestras compañeras se están arriesgando a hacerlo, ¿no? Se están arriesgando a hacerlo de esta forma en línea y otras alquilando departamento, hablando con los propios propietarios de su vivienda para poderlo hacer.
Thanks, Karina. Over to you, Felicita.
So thank you. Again, I think, yes, a number of sex workers really turned to online platforms, which was kind of occupying for many of us because the number of sex workers is high and many of them were not kind of the online platforms. So the ones who were used and the ones who were starting to try to work on them, yes, they were really trying to do that. But again, it comes with a lot of challenges because when it comes to online, it's something that most of us, especially people who are coming from the rural areas, are not used to it. So it means protection measures are very low. So we had some sex workers who approached from online and maybe they went to clients' houses or clients went where they are. And we have sex workers who are being violated from where they were because there was less security. So one of the things, if we are really thinking about an online platform, what really came out strongly, it's the fact that the security of sex workers who are not used to work online is really at risk.
Thanks.
And people are using the platform to attack.
Thank you. And I think it's, there's an important point to be made as well about the digital divide and how powerfully damaging that's been in the context of COVID. Ambassador, if I may ask you a question from the chat. We know that there are governments and civil society organizations that do not believe in sex workers' rights because they argue that prostitution is violence and they don't see sex work as work. I know this is something that you've had to contend with many times, given the conversations you're in multilateral settings. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, that's a difficult one for us. I think we always say it's one of the oldest professions that we know. It is a job, and everybody's entitled to certain very unconditional human rights. And I'm not saying that you find a common ground, because on certain issues it's very difficult, but it will never stop the Netherlands for explaining why we have a very different point of view. And I always believe, that's why I think today, but also the experience from Mozambique is so valuable. You can talk from your own information and your own experience. And I'm not saying that you are able to convince everybody. Unfortunately not. I wish I was. But I think it's very important to keep engaging in the dialogue. And then maybe with different people and making a case, also an economic case, but also a health case, also a human rights case. I think that's what we have to do and continue to do so.
Thank you, Ambassador. And if I may just answer for my organization, CREA, but also for the entire CMI consortium, we are feminist organizations who are firm advocates of sex workers' rights. And in fact, this whole campaign in some ways is our response to women's rights and feminist organizations that haven't yet come to understand that sex workers work, that sex workers choose sex work. It is a question of human rights. It's a question of bodily integrity, that the violence sex workers face is quite often the result of sex work being criminalized. So as you'll see throughout the campaign, we try to respond directly to those questions and those misconceptions. You'll see at the very end, we'll show you a little bit more about the campaign and some of the materials that are available. But as I said, they're really designed to speak to sex workers, designed to speak to feminist women's rights organizations, social justice organizations, donors who don't quite yet understand that sex work is work and sex worker rights are human rights and are a feminist issue. Felicita or Karina, do you want to respond to that as well? How do you, in your own work, engage with women's rights organizations to help them understand that sex work is work, sex work is a choice? Felicita, over to you.
Thank you, Susanna. So I think yes. Yes, I know here in Africa, we really partner, especially personally, us as the Kenyan sex workers, we partner with many women's organizations. We occupy many different platforms together. For example, I want to say that Keswa has been really working with women's organization and making sure that we have different trainings for them to be able to understand sex workers' rights, and sex worker is work that sex workers themselves have chosen. So we've also gone to deeper to make sure that we sometimes when it comes to resources, we resource for maybe trainings together for more sensitization. So I would like to mention Tika in this. I want to say so many women organizations in Kenya are coming out, but many of them are denying for the fact that they have their own beliefs and understanding. But we also have other women who have their own individual statement who come out to say, yes, I work with this organization, but I believe in sex workers and I believe that sex work is work. So this is something that we do at a country level, and I know this is something that is also done at a regional level with the African Sex Workers Alliance.
Thank you, Felicita. Over to you, Karina.
Bueno, nosotros tenemos experiencia desde 1998, hemos venido trabajando muy de cerca, cogido de la mano con las organizaciones de mujeres, con organizaciones feministas. Entonces existe un trabajo coordinado con estas organizaciones, ¿no es cierto? Eso ha permitido mirarnos como iguales, luchar también algunas cosas que hemos propuesto las trabajadoras del sexo, y esto también está sirviendo a nivel regional porque ya mis compañeras están también trabajando con otras organizaciones feministas en sus países, ¿no? Y es así que tenemos una compañera de El Salvador que ella está como coordinadora de un programa dentro de ONU Mujeres, ¿no es cierto? Entonces desde ahí estamos trabajando algunas cosas con feministas, amigas y aliadas, ¿no? Donde podemos sensibilizar y puedan entender nuestra posición de que nosotros reconocemos que el trabajo sexual es trabajo. Y más que todo el tema de los derechos, ¿no? Que tenemos derecho a decidir y que somos ciudadanas, ¿no? Y que estamos participando de igual en diferentes espacios y mesas donde podemos posesionar nuestros temas, donde podemos posesionar nuestras ideas, ¿no? Eso es lo que estamos avanzando en el tema de la relación con organizaciones feministas que están de acuerdo y reconocen que las trabajadoras sexuales tenemos derecho y que el trabajo sexual es trabajo, ¿no? Y que nos unimos por otras causas también, como el tema de la violencia. Nosotros tenemos una relación muy cerca acá, en el Ecuador, Machala, con el Movimiento de Mujeres del Oro, donde trabajamos el tema de la legalización a los casos de femicidio de trabajadoras del sexo, ¿no? Y justo ahora estamos programando todo una fecha de 16 días de activismo contra la violencia, donde tenemos agendas en común, donde vamos a hacer actividades en común con las mujeres feministas y las trabajadoras del sexo.
Thanks. Thanks everyone for that answer. The next question is, if sex workers choose to have children, what does life look like for them? I think them means the children. And I think another part of that was in another question is, does it cause harm to the children, and does sex work cause harm to sex workers? Karina, if you don't mind, I'll go to you for the first response.
Bueno, siempre tenemos esa pregunta sobre nuestros hijos. Generalmente la mayoría de las trabajadoras sexuales no tuvimos mejores oportunidades que las tienen nuestros hijos, que nosotros se las estamos dando a través del trabajo que estamos haciendo, que estudien, que se preparen, que sean profesionales, y que si en algún momento determinado quisieran decidir por el trabajo sexual, lo hagan con mejores oportunidades y conociendo realmente lo que es el tema de trabajo sexual. Pero en su mayoría, los hijos de las trabajadoras sexuales son profesionales y son personas que en un momento determinado aprendimos a hablar, cómo hablar con tu hijo que eres una trabajadora sexual, cómo enseñar a tu hijo a valorar cada cosa que tú le das y que ha sido comprado con el dinero del trabajo sexual. Generalmente nosotros, las trabajadoras sexuales, procuramos que nuestros hijos tengan una mejor calidad de vida, una mejor educación, ¿no es cierto? Lo que sí afecta muchas veces es el bullying, el estigma y la discriminación que hace la sociedad cuando saben que son hijos de trabajadoras sexuales. Y eso nosotros no estamos de acuerdo. Nosotros no permitimos que discriminen y violenten a nuestros hijos. Muchas veces ha habido casos de violencia sexual porque se cree que como son hijos de trabajadoras sexuales, cualquiera puede venir y violentar a nuestros hijos y no es así. Entonces nosotros en eso también hemos trabajado internamente con nuestras bases para que entiendan también que lo que hacemos es un trabajo sexual y que no tenemos que sentir vergüenza de lo que hacemos, sino que tenemos que enseñar a nuestros hijos a valorar cada cosa que nosotros le damos, que es con el dinero del trabajo sexual, y que a la larga nuestros hijos entienden de que su mamá hizo ese tipo de trabajo y que le dio un mejor porvenir, un mejor futuro a ellos o a ellas.
Thank you so much, Karina. Felicita, would you like to answer that too?
Yes, I think one of the things people need to understand is the fact that sex work is a career, is a job like any other job. When it comes to sex workers having children, does it mean other women are having children? Yes, it is a personal decision for a person to have kids because it is my personal decision. For example, I am a mother of 4 and I made a personal decision at sex work and I decided as a sex worker, I want to have this number of children and these are the number of children I'm able to take care of. So this is something that it happens to all the women, and sex workers are part of those working women who can have children as well.
Thank you, Felicita. Ambassador, would you like to answer that also again? I know that it's a question that you frequently get asked in various kinds of multilateral negotiations and at home. So yeah, it would be wonderful to
I
hear
find
your
so fascinating because in all professions, women still get these questions. I still get the question when I was appointed in Mozambique. People ask me, so what are you going to do with the children? I said, well, they're coming along with me and my husband too. So I think in all professions, women are still being asked the same question. So how are you going to combine work with children? And I'm just astounded that in 2020, we still get these questions. And I think, as I said, work is work. I'm an ambassador, a sex worker is a sex worker. We choose for a profession. And we can have children. Thank God for that. And I just hope that my daughter, who's now 14, when she chooses whatever career she wants to, she doesn't get to ask the question, because I know my son, who's 11, will never be asked the question. So how come you are, I don't know, an engineer and a father? Never.
Great point. Thank you very much. So there was a second part to that question, and I'm going to ask this, Felicita and Karina, because I know it's something that you get asked all the time, is, does sex work cause harm to sex workers? Karina, would you mind taking the first pass at answering?
No causa ningún daño. En todo caso, nos permite aprender a desarrollar muchísima destreza en el tema sexualidad, en el tema de los derechos, en el tema de empoderamiento. Nos volvemos más autónomas, más dueñas de nosotras mismas. No veo que nos ha causado, por lo menos a mí y a las poblaciones que yo conozco, a mis compañeras, no nos ha causado ningún tipo de daño. En todo caso, nos ha dado algunas herramientas que no teníamos. Capaz que si estuviéramos en casa como cualquier ama de casa, no hubiésemos aprendido muchísimas cosas en el tema del cuidado de nuestra salud, en el tema del cuidado de todo lo que tiene que ver con nuestro trabajo, el de saber que somos mujeres empoderadas y guerreras, que estamos afuera trabajando y que hemos aprendido a sobrevivir en todo un entorno violento, en todo un contexto que no reconoce el tema de los derechos. Somos unas guerreras. Hemos aprendido muchísimo en el trabajo sexual y yo creo que es el momento que mayormente he podido disfrutar cuando he sido trabajadora del sexo, y que lo disfruto cuando estoy con mis compañeras, que compartimos muchísimas cosas, que podemos hablar abiertamente el tema de la sexualidad y que no tenemos tapujos para poder decir las cosas, ¿no? Nos ha vuelto mucho más empoderada, mucho más autónoma y dueña de nuestro cuerpo.
Felicita, do you want to take a pass at answering that as well? Well, while we wait for Felicita to come back, I just wanted to read a response in the chat because I think it's a really important perspective that goes to particularly what Karina and Felicita have said about working with feminists, which is these are great reasons for all feminists to work together on universal childcare and other public services that help us balance work and family, regardless of the work we do. Thank you, Vicky, for that comment. Sorry, Felicita, back over to you.
Thank you very much, Susanna. So I think sex work does not cause harm to me as a sex worker, but there are things that are causing harm to me as a worker, as a sex worker. One, the fact that I'm still criminalized in my country, that is causing harm to me and my work. The fact that I'm still stigmatized and stigma and discrimination in my community that affects my work. The fact that I cannot go to church, I cannot access quality health services affects my work. So there are so many factors that are affecting us as sex workers, but sex work is not a harm to us. It is work just like any other work. For as long as we are protected, or sex work is protected in our countries and it is decriminalized, then sex work is safe work just like any other work.
Thanks very much, Felicita. And just to underscore that, you know, what causes harm is criminalization. What causes harm is police violence. What causes harm is bullying, violence and harassment in the community. Those are what we need to be talking about. Or as Sabrina Sanchez, hi Sabrina, says in the chat, sex work is not harmful itself. What is harmful is the lack of labor laws, lack of protection from violence, the fact that criminalization means that sex workers who are experiencing violence often have no place to go for a remedy. So I want to close the Q&A there, but with that, let me ask Karina, Felicita, and then the ambassador if you have any closing comments you'd like to make. So Karina, back over to you.
Bueno, mi comentario sería recomendación que el Estado tiene que reconocer los derechos que tenemos las trabajadoras sexuales, reconocernos como ciudadanas, no como ciudadana de segunda clase, sino como ciudadana, que es importante hacer acciones positivas hacia nuestro sector y que es importante seguir invirtiendo en fortalecer a las organizaciones de trabajadoras sexuales. Existe una tendencia de fortalecer a los sistemas de salud, que no está mal, pero también se tiene que seguir fortaleciendo a las organizaciones, porque somos las que damos la respuesta a nuestras poblaciones, no es el Estado. Ese sería mi aporte. Gracias.
Thank you, Karina. Felicita, your last comments to us?
Yes, my last comments are going to be sex work is work. Sex work will always remain to be work in every country that we are coming from. The only thing that we are asking as sex workers is for us to be listened to, is for us to be given spaces, other women to come and join hands, open the doors to partner with other women, to work with everyone. For as long as we are still criminalized, we need other women for us to be able to move on the same page. When we are talking about gender equality, let's remember that sex workers are also women and they are part and parcel of each and every space where women are seated at. So let's be at the table because we always do it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicita. Ambassador, your final comments.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the inspirational afternoon. I think the lovely speaker from Kenya just said it really well. Workers work, and many of the sex workers are female. And in order to get to gender equality, we need to raise the voices and to amplify the voices. And we're here from the Netherlands and many of the people online as well to help support that.
Thank you so much. And please stay. We have a couple more treats for you. First, we're going to show you the Count Me In Consortium's response to some of the questions about is sex work that often come from our allies and colleagues in women's rights, social justice, and human rights organizations. Stuti, will you show the animated video, please?
Who did you want to be when you grew up? A firefighter? A doctor? An artist? Maybe your dream came true. Maybe plans changed. Maybe you have plenty of choices. Maybe just a few. No matter what your situation, it is your undeniable right to safety, security, and decent wages at work. Seems obvious, doesn't it? And yet, there is a group of workers whose rights are constantly questioned and denied. Sex workers. Sex work is a commercial transaction between consenting adults. It is done voluntarily and must never be confused with forced or coerced labor or trafficking. In other words, sex work is work, and sex worker rights are a human rights and a feminist issue.
Still, almost all countries criminalize sex work, and sex workers face persecution and violence because of punitive laws, policies, and practices. In response, sex workers' rights advocates and allies across the globe are calling for the decriminalization of sex work and an end to stigma. The current twin pandemics of COVID-19 and gender-based violence have made the lack of respect for and recognition of sex workers' rights more apparent, and access to services and justice even harder to attain. The CMI Consortium and partners believe that sex workers' rights are women's rights and are recognized by feminist organizations all over the world. After all, isn't bodily autonomy a fundamental principle of feminism?
It is likely that someone you care about is a sex worker, whether you know it or not. Here is what you can do to take action and support sex workers' rights. Only rights can stop the wrongs. Advocate for sex work to be legally recognized as work and for labor protection for sex workers. Demand an end to criminalization of all aspects of sex work. Acknowledge sex workers' rights as a feminist human rights issue and support collaborative action to challenge criminalization, discrimination, and stigmatization of sex workers of all genders. Fund sex workers' rights and organizing led by sex workers themselves. There are no bad workers, only bad laws. Let's work towards positive change together. Learn more at www.cmiconsortium.org.
Thank you. So in 1 minute, we're going to show a final video, and with that final video, we will close. But before doing that, I really want to take a moment to thank all the partners in this collaboration. Our warm thanks to Ambassador Grottenhaus, Felicita Abdallah, Karina Bravo, as well as those in the videos, Marina Avramenko, Jules Kim, Shauna May Trotman, and Diana Rivas. And of course, our thanks to the Global Network of Sex Work Projects for the ongoing collaboration, the interpreters, the closed captioners, and all the folks who helped make this happen, particularly our Sex Worker Rights Working Group in CMI, and of course, the Count Me In Consortium. And I have to take a moment to personally give my special thanks to my colleague Stuti Chirpati. As you will see, Stuti has been managing the entire this entire webinar, including the interpretation, the videos. She must have 8 arms. Thank you, Stuti. And over to our final video. And thanks all of you so much for joining us. Please go to www.cmiconsortium.org for more about the campaign. And here's the final video.
Gender inequality persists worldwide. Women, girls, and non-binary, gender non-conforming, trans and intersex people confront multiple layers of discrimination every day. Count Me In is a special joint initiative to amplify their voices and support their activism. Count Me In supports feminist movements to grow in strength and numbers, to speak up, speak out, and take action in their communities, in the media, in politics, in every place where decisions affect affect them. Among the most silenced voices are those of sex workers. To correct misconceptions about sex work, Count Me In has created a series of fact sheets to emphasize some of the challenges that sex workers face. They provide accessible information about how criminalization, stigma, vulnerability to violence, and COVID-19 affect the lives of sex workers worldwide. If you are an ally and want to help, you will also find information on how to take action and support sex workers' rights. Sex work is work, and sex workers' rights are human rights. Learn more about sex workers' rights at www.cmiconsortium.org.
And with that, thank you all very much for joining us. Please go to the website and follow us for the 2 weeks of this campaign. Bye.